Now I want to talk about playing the hi-hat cymbals. Okay, so the right-handed setup of the kit, we're going to use our right hand to do this. Remember the grip, thumb on the stick, into the back of that crease of the first knuckle, supported by that finger. We want this arm straight across. Notice how the tip is heading towards the centre wingnut here on the centre of the hi-hat. And I've got the tip of the stick about 25 millimeters in from the edge of the cymbal. My arm and elbow are all in by my side. It's not out there. Hold it in, straight across your front. We don't want this to be any heavier than necessary. If you hold that out, you're supporting the weight of this part of your arm all the time. So bring it down. So tip facing towards the centre, 25 millimeters in, and this is the most important bit that all beginners miss. Notice how the stick is sloping downwards towards the cymbal. It is not going upwards, okay? You don't have this lazy wrist and hand down here playing upwards, chopping on the edge of the hi-hats. That's wrong. Accept that now before you go any further. There are occasions and playing styles where you may wish to play like that, but as a general rule, it's the tip that should be hitting the stick. So lift the stick and your hand back up, aiming about the 25 millimeters in. Right, now the first thing you've got to do is to see, can you consistently hit that position every time without lowering your hand and keeping the beats perfectly spaced. Let's try some quaver beats in 4/4 time. So that's 4 crotchets to the bar. We're going to play 8 cymbal taps. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. That'll be the whole bar. Here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Remember, are they evenly spaced? Is the wrist staying up high enough? Is the tip of the stick hitting where we want it to hit? This is such a basic and important technique to your playing. You've got to get this right before you go any further. Now, when I'm teaching, a lot of my students move the stick about like this. Make sure you're not doing that. And then, of course, the lowering of the wrist comes in. Okay, that's all to be avoided. This is what we want to see. One and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, now we're going to introduce the snare now as well to the rhythm. Snare drum's going to be played with the left hand. Remember how we talked earlier about this nice V shape on the snare drum. Okay, now this left hand is going to play exactly its half of the V. So let's bring this one back over. See where the tip of the stick is? We don't want to see the stick moving over here. That's one of the things you've got to watch and monitor. Make sure your stick isn't moving over here. We want it to hit just left of center. Now, we're going to add the snare on beats 2 and 4. Okay, this is for pop drumming, pop or basic rock drumming. Now, they're not going to bash into each other, because if I wait until I'm lifting the stick for 2 on the cymbal and then at the same time lift the snare, they're not going to clash into each other. Okay, so on 2 and 4 the snare will play. Notice again how I'm bending from the wrists. I'm not lifting the arms up and down. Here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now notice also that when I'm not using the snare drum stick, that it's pointing down, angling down towards the snare drum. Again, another popular problem that students have is that they leave the stick waiting in the air there, and of course it gets in the way. It must be down, and I have it again about 30 millimeters off the drum head. Okay, so we've put the snare drum on 2 and 4. Now we're going to add the bass drum on 1 and 3. Let's forget the snare drum beats for a minute and just play the cymbal and the bass drum. Remember, 1 and 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now, here's another common place for people to go wrong. They allow the bass drum beat to interfere with what's going on in the cymbals. And the way that comes out is that they may push harder on the cymbal when they play the bass drum beat. Or they may just play it louder when they play the bass drum beat. Or even a little bit faster when the bass drum beat comes along. The cymbal and the bass drum must operate totally independently. They must not be influencing each other. So remember, we had the cymbals on 1 and, 2 and, 3 and 4 and. We had the snare drum on 2 and 4 and the bass drum on 1 and 3. Now it's time to put all that together. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we're going to add double beats to the snare. Here we go. The bass drum will remain the same. Right, the next thing we're going to do then is move from double beats on the snare every time to every other time. So we're going to do a single snare beat and then a double snare beat. So the single snare beat on 2, the double snare beat on 4, and then 4 and. Here we go. Of course, these could be the opposite way round. Okay, so the next thing we could do then is perhaps revert back to the single beats on the snare, but let's put doubles every time on the bass. Double bass and then a single. Other way round. Okay, let's try a mixture now, a constantly changing mixture of doubles and singles between the snare drum and the bass drum. Here we go. Now, the important thing to watch out for whilst you're doing all of this is that these double beats do not affect your tempo, the speed. Okay, you've got to make sure that double beats do not speed you up. Another thing to look out for with the bass drum beats when you're doing doubles is that sometimes not only can the second beat be speeded up, but also that the first beat is louder than the second one. Okay, these are all common pitfalls for you. You've got to look out for them all and be patient. I don't think I've used that word yet, but in every lesson we talk about being patient and taking your time.